Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar The Last Airbender comic review. This one's going to be for The Rift Part 3, third part of the Rift trilogy, and obviously the final part. Obviously, for example, here's Part 1, Part 2, and of course Part 3. Here's the back cover of the book. You can see General Old Iron and Aang in the Avatar state fighting each other here. Pretty cool fight actually in the book, and just a kind of your blurb about what the book is actually about. But yeah, overall I thought this was a really good book. I thought it was a good conclusion to the Rift trilogy, and I think overall I would now consider the Rift to be the best Avatar comic series so far. It has overtaken the Search for me, and I think part of the reason for that is because the Search was good for what it was, and it was super focused on Zuko, Azula, and Ursa, and then a little bit of kind of like these other waterbender brother and sister kind of thrown in. With this, I felt like everyone had a little bit of something going on, and you got to touch on a little bit of everything there. And I was a bit worried going into this book that it wouldn't be able to resolve everything, but by the end, it did, and some of them, got fairly short resolutions, fairly to the point, but it all worked. None of the resolutions really felt like rushed to me, and more like, oh, they just saw it from a different perspective or something like that. It worked quite well, and this book really makes it clear that the kind of theme of this book, like the theme of the Search was kind of like family, the theme of the Promise was like making your decisions and kind of sticking to them. Don't allow your decisions to be kind of made by others. Kind of like Aang was almost allowing his decisions to be made by Roku. Zuko almost allowing his decisions to be made by Ozai. In this one, I really think that the kind of theme is kind of change, and that's kind of fitting that family was explored in book 2 and stuff like that, and now this third trilogy is kind of focusing on change, because ultimately, in a way, that's what most of the things are resolved by. You see change, and especially with the spirit section of this story, that's very important. And yeah, the spirit section of this story is really good. Like, the spirit stuff in the backstory with Ursa was excellent, and some of the spirit stuff that we got there. But this story in this series is amazing. I really do think there's some really kind of meaty scenes where you really get into some kind of big kind of thought-provoking stuff about humans and spirits, the conflict that goes on there, and is there a place for the spirits in the human world at this point in time, and just stuff like that. It's really interesting. And what else? Just in general, you find the backstory of like Lady Tianhai, and General Old Iron gets to speak a lot. It's just, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and for the first time, I think with any of these comic series, I really had one of those moments where like I turned the page, I saw something happen in one of the panels, and it was just like, what? Did that really just happen in this comic? Like, it was such a big event that I couldn't believe that it actually happened in the comics, because even with the Search, like, there was some big stuff happening there, but it was all kind of like, oh cool, that's a nice reveal, that's cool, some interesting stuff here. Whoa, Ozai may not be Zuko's father at the end of the Search Part 1. Was kind of like, whoa, but it can't be true. With this one, like, this thing happened on panel. And yeah, I'll get to talking about spoilers towards the end of the review. I'm going to finish up like talking about the book in a kind of non-spoiler sense, and then I'll warn you when I'm going to talk about spoilers. Let's talk about some specifics here. Toph and Aang is probably one of the main conflicts going on in this book, and we see that's primarily revolved around Toph thinking that Aang is kind of living too much in the past and relying too much on all these kind of ceremonies and traditions from the past, and she believes that modern stuff should be the way of the future, and we should kind of continue moving forward, not look at the past. While Aang has kind of been like, it's important to remember what came before us, because especially for him, as kind of reuniting the air nomads, like with the air acolytes, he is trying to keep some of those traditions alive, in terms of like, these people, they can't just lose everything that they are. but stuff has to change, and he's kind of trying to introduce them to all of that. But he's kind of, you know, definitely kind of leaning too far in that way, but you can understand why he's doing it. And their conflict has mainly been about that. Toph's been against what he's doing, and the idea that the refinery shouldn't be there. She thinks it's a great idea, while Aang just doesn't think it should be there because it's sacred ground. And that's definitely the kind of conflict that you get between the two. One's more for modern, one's more for the past, and ultimately the resolution, I think, comes about fairly well, because the two actually come to blows in this book over this. Like, they actually have a bending fight. I'm not going to go into like the specifics of what happened right here, but I think it's just a thing that maybe people should know, that this conflict between them actually does end up kind of them having a fight. Obviously, we know they remain friends, so it's not like friendship altering sort of thing, but they do fight, and the conclusion to this, in my mind, works because obviously when General Old Iron comes in, you know, the front and back cover both show this fight. The Toph Aang fight stops, and she kind of helps him there, and that's where they kind of come back together. And the conclusion isn't some big scene between Toph and Aang where they talk about what they've learned and what they should have thought about when talking to the other one. No, they just kind of make up, and you kind of see the result in the festival that happens at the end. In that it's a compromise between the two. It's a traditional festival, but it has modern things to it, where it's not the exact same as before. It's been renamed, it's changed, and it's for a different cause. But it captures both sides in that it is still a festival, but it's also something Aang and Toph can both enjoy together. And it's just a cool way to resolve that without having to just have pages upon pages of Aang and Toph talking to each other about what they learned. So that was pretty good. With regards to Toph and her father Lao, the preview for the book, which you've all probably seen, the 8-page preview, basically shows most of this. There's not much else for me to really say apart from like those panels that happen there, in that they're in this really tough situation, life and death. Toph's holding them up after a cave collapse, and she's struggling, and for the first time, Lao is directly confronted, like he's right there. Toph is saving his life by doing this, by the power of his daughter, and that she's not fragile, that she is saving his life, and he's kind of useless in this situation, and he comes to realize that, and that he kind of is worrying about her, but he basically tells her, you know, I'm the most powerful earthbender in the world. You don't need to worry about me. So I kind of like that, and that's kind of how it happens. And then there's a scene later on where Lao shows that he kind of knows now that his daughter is not fragile, and they kind of come back together. And again, they kind of do the thing where there's no big scene between the two where they kind of hug and forgive each other, but you kind of get the sense that that's already kind of happened. Like, they just understand each other now. And yeah, I kind of would have liked to have seen some form of a scene, kind of like The Search, where Zuko and Ursa reunite, but we don't get a lot of scenes after their reunions together to really see what their relationship is like. It's the same here with Toph and Lao. We don't really get to see kind of what their relationship is like now, but just that, like, there is a relationship open now, communication is open between the two, and something's going to happen there. Their mother isn't involved in the story right now, so maybe that's going to be a thing going forward. What else is there to talk about? The Katara, Sokka, and kind of Nyuk and Nutha thing, the whole water tribe thing. Again, we kind of were led to believe that maybe there's something interesting more here than kind of we know, but last part really kind of showed us what it was about. That the two of them were kind of resentful of Sokka and Katara for leaving the tribe, not coming back, because they're off doing this thing, saving the world with Aang. And there's definitely kind of a perspective of, like, it was kind of like, are Katara and Sokka selfish for not coming back and trying to save the world? Or are these two girls just, resentful of basically that they got to do this thing and they stayed away from the tribe and the tribe got worse without them? In this, you really just see that in the heat of action, Sokka and Katara kind of come alive. They really help, while Nutha and Nyuk don't really know what to do. And it's kind of there they just kind of see that, oh, they've helped save the world. It's not that they didn't want to come back, they've just been so busy doing stuff that has the fate of the world, which is above just the fate of their tribe. And they kind of realize how proud they are to have like two world heroes come from the same tribe that they do. And it's just a very kind of to the point, simple explanation of what happens. And it just works out nicely, I think. Only other thing to really talk about, I suppose, is the spirit stuff. Now, most of the spoilers I think revolve around this, because I haven't really avoided talking about spoilers and all of the other stuff. Like, I basically told you what happened with Toph and Aang, Toph and Lao. It's not really spoilers to kind of say what happened, because it's really just, little resolutions here and there. The big reveals and spoilers all come with the spirit side of the story, so I'm going to be careful not to spoil anything here, because these are stuff that, like, I had a big reaction reading some of this stuff, so I don't want to go too heavy into it. But the idea is obviously that, Yang Chen in the past made this deal with General Old Iron where he wouldn't basically destroy all these humans that he blames for killing Lady Tianhai, on condition that she kind of fulfills these criteria and he won't come back. We find out what those criteria are, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say what they are. It's just that statue was built of Lady Tianhai, the one that we see, and that no like settlements of humans can live on this land. That it has to remain the same. And Yang Chen decided, okay, we'll celebrate this festival there every year, and that's the Yang Chen Festival. But it's primarily there as a kind of respect thing for General Old Iron about Lady Tianhai, rather than an air nomad cultural thing. So the key thing is obviously that the place was meant to remain clear, yet a refinery was built there. So that's where the conflict comes up when we find out that all the mining and stuff like that, the fact that there's people living there, is bringing General Old Iron back because the terms of the deal have been broken. And a lot of the conflict towards the end between Toph and Aang, the reason they fight, comes out because Aang thinks that the only way to resolve this is to destroy the factory and basically make the land back to the way it was, and then Old Iron will see that, oh, we made a mistake, we'll fix it, he'll go away. But Toph, remains that, you shouldn't destroy this just because of some deal made in the past, this is the future. And then he comes and he's not actually willing to bargain at all. The deal has been broken, there's no fixing it. He's here to exact revenge, basically, and that's what you really see here. This spirit is not here to talk like he was before with Yang Chen. He's here to fight, and he takes up the armor, and that's where the fight starts. And what's really interesting here is just the conversations that happen. You really see that General Old Iron is completely against humans, that he completely blames them for the death of Tianhai, and thinks that humans are good for nothing more than domination, destruction, and that sort of thing. That he thinks that spirits have no place left in the world with humans the way they are. And with some big events that happen, he kind of, thinks he's proven right. He's completely right that that's the way all humans are. Though towards the end, other characters arrive and stuff like that, and we later find out that, in reality, it's kind of the opposite. That's one way of looking at it from this guy who's actually angry, and this is a spirit. Most spirits kind of act like they're above human emotion and stuff like that. But we've seen with the Mother of Faces that she has these kind of personal things too. That she has this son that she doesn't have, the Ko, who she doesn't have a good relationship with, and that's a very kind of human thing. Yet she kind of acts like, Ursa, what are these family problems you're dealing with here? Why do I care about these when they have their own problems of their own? And again, here he tries to act like he's above it. General Old Iron tries to act like kind of he's above it all and speaks down to humans when he's angry about something that happened to him. So he's not being reasonable. It's interesting because Aang just wants nothing more than like peace and to reason with him. He doesn't want to fight. Some shocking events happen, and you get some big revelations here towards the end of the book. I really don't want to spoil it because there's some amazing stuff that happens towards the end of the book, but eventually, kind of through a sequence of events, you get that Aang kind of just comes to realize that he kind of begins to believe Old Iron at some point, and he's like, maybe the spirits are like relics of the past, like my people, like my traditions, that, you know, they shouldn't come back, they're just in the past. And, you know, other characters come and kind of tell him that, you know, that's not the case. Like, we can connect the past and the future through now in the present, and we can change things and make things better going forward for the spirits. And it's this really interesting way of just touching on this huge theme in the Avatar world that's kind of only recently been, like, maybe resolved with the whole Republic City finding peace between humans and spirits. Um, that, you know, can humans and spirits live together? And it's a really nice way of exploring that in this book. And I hope it's kind of continued a little bit going forward. Um, but yeah, overall, this is this excellent book. I really do recommend that you pick this up. If you've bought part ones and two, there's no reason for you not to buy part three. You have to finish this series. It's a really good way to finish it. Um, it doesn't have a preview for the next series. There's no like cover of the next series, so I assume there's been some delay, like that there's kind of decided, okay, future, we're planning this many series. We know there's two more coming. I assume it'll just be a couple more months before we find out what the next one is. But yeah, Rift was amazing. So you have my non-spoiler thoughts more or less. So yeah, let's move into spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled on the big points of this book, please turn off the video and don't complain in the comments if you get spoiled by this, because I warned you that the big spoilers are coming now. So first thing I want to talk about is big reference to the promise. Aang, to talk to Yang Chen to get an important piece of information, basically to find out what the terms of the agreement were. To find that out, he has to reconnect with Roku. So he gets a piece of earth and basically uses earthbending to create the fire symbol and attaches this stone to his pendant, and now he has the fire symbol back. He meditates and talks to Roku again. And it's just this really nice scene. Again, it's not too long of the two arguing or anything like that. It's just that they kind of come back together. They both kind of you know, care about each other and want to kind of be connected again. And Roku, you know, doesn't really say like I was wrong or you were right, but just kind of points out that, you know, all advice I can give you comes from the things I experienced in my life. But ultimately, you in the present have to decide on that, and you need to find a balance between taking advice from the past and taking advice from the present to affect the future. And that's kind of a lot of what the stuff towards the end of this deals with, just this idea of find a balanced way to touch on things, because that was what the promise dealt with Aang. In that Roku said, kill Zuko now, he's acting out, kill him, because Roku didn't deal with Sozin straight away. So in the future, to fix that, he thinks that Aang should take out a threat immediately before another Sozin happens. But in reality, Aang is not like that. He knows Zuko is not Sozin and can handle it differently. And you ultimately what you learn is just that Aang just should have not taken all of Roku's advice to hand. He had to deal with Zuko, but in a different way. And ultimately, I suppose that's what he did, but he maybe took it a little bit too far by just breaking contact, and now he kind of realizes that it's just about limiting, like, taking a little bit of advice from the past avatars, but basing it on your own experiences as well. So I really liked how that went down. Then mainly the other spoilers are just the spirit stuff. Like, we get what happened to Lady Tianhai, obviously, the story about what happened to her. From part 2, we know that the former kind of mayor of the town that Tianhai looked over, he basically says, I was responsible for her death. He didn't say like he killed her or anything like that. And we find out what that actually means, because it was a little bit confusing. Just, I was responsible for her death, without actually saying I killed her. So we find out she comes back at the end. What happens is that Aang obviously is kind of upset after what's happened. I'll talk about that in a minute. And these cranes come down. The cranes are actually seen in the Rift Part 1, hovering around the Tianhai statue. These are actually revealed to be spirit cranes, and together they form up into Lady Tianhai. And she explains that what happened was that she watched over this patch of land years ago. Obviously, she's a spirit, she's ancient. And she just grew tired of the fact that it was stagnant, unchanging, and it just remained the same constantly. And it all changed when people came and started to inhabit this place and built their towns. And this basically interested her because this place that she'd watched over for, I assume thousands of years, just stayed the same while she watched over it. Yet when humans came, this place constantly evolved and eventually became one of the biggest cities in the world. And so what she came to do was once a year, after Old Iron left, she took human form and wandered around the town just experiencing all of the change that would happen in the past year, basically, in the town. She met the guy who says that he was responsible for her death when he was younger. He was the prince of this town. And basically fell in love with him because this guy was a kind of inventor. He basically showed her all of the kind of positive changes that humans can make to the world, like in creating books and inventions and stuff like that. The two of them actually married, and she actually took on human form permanently because she loved him so much. And in doing this, she basically took away her immortality and actually became mortal. And so she knew in doing this that she would die like humans do over the course of time. That happened, and that's why kind of General Old Iron explains it. He thinks that the humans kind of like tricked her into doing this, when in fact she did it out of love to kind of become closer to her husband and stuff like that. And that she really did care about the humans, rather than it being anything like trickery. So it was just kind of General Old Iron not understanding. And yeah, and then she reveals that, Aang's like, wait, how are you here if you're dead? And she reveals that spirits never die, but when they do kind of like die, get killed, they change forms. They gain a new form, and that's why Lady Tianhai is now kind of in these kind of form of spirit cranes, the birds. And from there, she just kind of explains to Aang that what Old Iron said earlier on was kind of wrong. Humans aren't just about destroying and dominating. That their prime trait is actually the ability to create. And while Old Iron talks about how he wants everything to remain the same, and the fact that they built stuff on this land was bad, that was actually positive because change is good, because she got bored just watching over this place that remained the same. And just this idea that, let me actually get to it, because there's a lot of stuff going on towards the end of the book. It's important to get this right. Where is it? Yeah, she says, do you understand? The spirits will always have a place in this world as long as you and humans like you create one for us. And she believes that ultimately they will create a civilization that preserves and protects even as it grows. And just that concept that she believes so heavily in the kind of positive side of humanity, that even though they make some mistakes, maybe taking their progress too far, that ultimately creating new stuff and advancing forward is a positive, because even spirits like to see change. And I suppose you sort of see that in the spirit world, in that when you go to the spirit world, it's this ancient old place that looks like it's remained the same constantly, and it may change depending on light and dark, but there's no technology in the spirit world. And that kind of explains that some spirits just like change. And that kind of explains why Republic City seems to be the place where spirits found peace with humans, and that's the place where the most change in the world happens. And it makes sense that that's the place where the spirit lines are and the main group of spirits in the human world is. So that's really cool. And this all helps to calm Aang down after, in my opinion, the most shocking thing in the whole book happens. Aang is basically forced to kill General Old Iron, because he attacks Toph and his metalbenders, and the metalbenders, because they arrive to help him in this fight, because Aang can't break through his metal armor. So the metalbenders basically peel away his armor, giving Aang a chance to kind of strike him. But Aang kind of doesn't want to, because he wants to talk. He doesn't want to kill the spirit just there and then because he's fighting him. But the spirit, in seeing the metalbenders rip his armor off, he gets angry at them, goes to kill them, and basically Aang only has a split second to react, and he's in the Avatar state. He attacks and is forced to basically kill General Old Iron to defend his friends. And as General Old Iron is dying, he basically uses the fact that Aang has killed him as a way to kind of say that, look, all humans are the same, even you, the Avatar. you're not balanced. You fight on the side of humans over spirits because you're a human yourself. You've just killed me, and this convinces me that there's no place left in the physical world for spirits anymore. And Aang is just so upset after this. Like, he doesn't cry, but I think the panel works even better. The fact that he doesn't cry. Where is it? Here. You can just sort of see that panel down there at the bottom. Just that look on Aang's face. He's so remorseful about this, and Katara and Lady Tianhai, who appears later on, help him through this. But it's just very interesting that they actually had that happen, and obviously they get around the fact that Aang technically hasn't killed him, but instead, killed that form of him, and now Old Iron will maybe return in the new form, and maybe we'll be more understanding of humans now because of that. But maybe he'll discover that Tianhai is still alive in a different form and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, really cool. Like, all of this, the spirit stuff at the end is amazing in my opinion. Like, it's really, really good. Definitely worth buying the book for that alone. But yeah, that's the review. I have a written review up on the site, avatarthelastairbrenneronline.com. Link to that in the description. And finally, there's going to be a podcast on Saturday, podcast special, where we review this book. We're going to go through it page by page, discussing it as we go. So if you haven't read the book, that's probably the best place to get the whole story in order from, because we're going to basically not quite read through it page by page, but I'm going to describe what happens over a couple of pages. We'll discuss it and keep going like that, and it's going to be really fun. I always love doing those podcasts. But yeah, Rift Part 3, excellent book, definitely worth buying. Definitely let me know in the comments when you read it, what your thoughts are on the book, or if you haven't and you read the spoilers anyway, what are your thoughts on some of the stuff that happened. So thanks for watching, and bye.